and welcome to CNBC Africa Exchange alongside WEF Africa. My name is Nozi Pumbanjwa, and it's an absolute pleasure to moderate and host this special conversation that we're having with Dr. Bernie Fanaroff. Now, Dr. Fanaroff is the special advisor to the director at the Square Kilometre Array, and he's going to be walking us through the brief history of the SKA, but also tapping into where the project is now and what does it mean for the socio-economic development of the 8 African countries that are participating in this project. Remember that if you'd like to be a part of this conversation, you can tweet us by following us at CNBC Africa or using the hashtag CNBC Africa Exchange. We're also hashtagging WEFA, that's WEFA 19 for WEF Africa 2019. Dr. Fanaroff, thank you very much for making the time to join us. And perhaps we've been talking about the SKA in South Africa and even other parts of the continent for a while. Let's take a couple of steps back. And can you just walk us through a brief history of the project, and in particular, what are the biggest achievements to date that we have been celebrating?
Thanks, Nazipo. The first thing to say is, what is radio astronomy? Radio astronomy means looking at the universe with radio waves. We're used to looking at it with light waves, but you can make pictures using radio waves as well. And to do that, you use a radio telescope. So in the 1990s, astronomers around the world started asking themselves, how can we build a radio telescope to make pictures of the universe when it was very, very young and follow it right through its history? Now, if you think about it, if you look very far away, you're looking backwards in time because the light or the radio waves take billions of years to reach us. So you actually are running a time machine.
Sure.
So they asked, what do we have to do to be able to look all the way back to the beginning, after the Big Bang when the universe began, and then trace it forward as its structure grew and galaxies started and first stars grew and so on. So they came up with the idea of building a telescope which was a square kilometre in size. Now that's physically impossible to do, and you wouldn't be able to afford it anyway if you built one big dish, you know, the satellite dishes. So you build what's called an array, which is a lot of small telescopes,
right,
and you join them together with optical fiber, and you put the signals from all of them. They all look at the same place in the sky. You feed the signals into a computer, and the computer makes a picture of what you're looking at, whether it's a very distant galaxy,
yeah,
or clouds of gas or exploding stars or whatever. So in about 2002, we became aware that there was a discussion about where this telescope should be built.
right.
And at the beginning of 2003, the Department of Science and Technology decided we should make a bid to host the telescope in Africa. And at that time, it was clear it was going to Australia. There was no question about it. So everybody was a bit skeptical. How can you build the world's largest scientific instrument and probably the most advanced and complex scientific instrument in Africa? And our answer was, why not? We've got good sites, we've got wonderful engineers and scientists. Let's go for it. So we put in first an expression of interest, and we were shortlisted with Australia in 2006.
Right.
And then there was a long process of looking at all the characteristics of the site, the weather and the climate and the power lines and all kinds of things. And in 2012, the recommendation was made that the Square Kilometre Array should be built in South Africa and our 8 other African partner countries. And then there was negotiation, as there always is in these things, and it was decided to build part in Australia and the biggest part in Africa. So we also decided in 2004 that we shouldn't just put in a bid to host a telescope. In other words, give them a piece of ground and people from the north would then come and do all the exciting stuff. So the Department of Science and Technology decided that we should build our own, what's called a precursor telescope.
Right.
In other words, a smaller version, so that we could learn about the technology, we could develop innovative ideas, both in the science and the technology. So we decided to do it differently to the way other people were doing it. We said, instead of having scientists build this, we're going to make it an engineering project. The scientists will tell us what they want. We're going to do it with engineers so that we make it as cheaply as possible with the best possible performance. And that's what's happened. So we built our Meerkat telescope. The Square Kilometre Array will have 2,000 of these small dishes.
Right.
We've built 64 to start with. And it was launched in July 2018. It's already started doing exciting science, which we can talk about later. But it's working so well that the German Max Planck Institute and the Chinese government between them are going to build another 20 dishes for us at their own cost. And the Germans have already built a whole new set of radio receivers as well as the ones we've built. And the Australians and various others have built computer racks and so on. So everybody is saying this Meerkat telescope is the best in the world. And it was designed by South Africans with our African partners. It was built in South Africa, and the innovative ideas come from young South Africans. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a very good news story. But of course, going with that, I'm sorry to drag on, is our Human Capital Development Program.
Right.
So one of the main reasons why the Department of Science and Technology wanted to go into this project was to say we're facing a world which is increasingly digital. We can't allow ourselves to be isolated on the southern tip of Africa.
Right.
We're already marginalized in the global economy. Unless we have the know-how and the expertise, we're going to be further marginalized. This is $1 trillion or multi-trillion-dollar economy. We've got to play a role in it. And as our president said in his State of the Nation address last year, he said the Square Kilometre Array, because it's using the most innovative and up-to-date digital technologies, allows us to bring young people into science and engineering and give them expertise and skills in these critical technologies,
And
which will be
Dr.
important.
Fanaroff been able to act as a catalyst to develop that human capital and to really see a pipeline of new engineers and new skill sets coming online because of this opportunity on the southernmost tip of the continent?
Yeah, and further up in the
And
continent.
further up, of course.
So we've done about 1,200 bursaries since 2005 when the project started. And those are young engineers and mainly physicists and astronomers in South Africa, but in our partner countries as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have gone through to master's degrees, PhD, postdoctoral work, now become more senior researchers. A lot of the young scientists from Africa have gone back to their own countries and started to teach there, running courses. So it's had a knock-on effect. We've also done further building those. So in Ghana, for instance, working with the Ghanaian government, we've converted a big satellite dish there for astronomy. And we've used that as a way of training Ghanaian engineers, technicians, scientists, and now people from Kenya have been involved, Madagascar, Mauritius, Zambia, and so on. So it's quite a big, and there's a very nice program that we're doing with the British government's Newton Fund called Development in Africa through Radio Astronomy. And that's bringing young people to South Africa and to the UK for further training. And they liked that so much they gave us another nearly £3 million to do development in Africa through radio astronomy, big data, because one of the things about the telescope is it absorbs more data than is in the whole World Wide Web. So it's the ideal big data program.
So I can see in the audience that there are a couple of wide eyes, because I think sometimes it's really difficult to grasp some of these scientific projects and to really visualize them. I understand you've got some pictures that we're going to be projecting on screen that you're going to be sharing with us and just walking us through some of them so we can really latch onto the image that you're painting in our minds. So what are we seeing right now?
The first one you're seeing is the ochre from the Blombos Cave in the Southern Cape. Just to remind everybody that technology started in Africa. So it's not a surprise that we can build the world's most advanced instrument. That's where we've built the Meerkat telescope and where the Square Kilometre Array will be built. It's in our Northern Cape province. The blue is where there are people and the white spaces are where there are few people.
Right.
So it's not empty, but there are not many people. And that's what you need for a radio telescope, because people with cell phones and cars and so on interfere with the telescope. That's what the Meerkat telescope looks like now. That's the central part. It extends over 8 kilometers. the Square Kilometre Array in its first phase will extend 150 kilometres,
Yeah.
and the second phase will extend right through Africa. So that's our base where we've got our computers and where we build the antennas. That's in the Karoo, which is the dry part of the Northern Cape. That's what the Milky Way looks like from the Karoo, and you can see how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
The nice thing about radio astronomy is if you look at the Milky Way here with light, you can see there are dark patches in it.
Yeah.
Those are dust patches, so you can't see the stars behind them. But with a radio telescope, you can see through the dust.
Sure.
This is a picture of our buried computer room on that site that you saw. So we've got huge arrays of computers which take the signals and make the pictures. And these are among the fastest computers in the world. And that's the first picture that was shown when the telescope was launched in July
what is
2018. Now, if you think back to what you saw about the Milky Way,
Yeah.
this is a picture just of the central part of the Milky Way, but made with radio waves, not light waves, so you're not blocked by the dust. So if you look at the left-hand part, there you can see some bubbles.
Yeah.
Those are stars which have gone through their lives and have exploded. So you see a bubble of explosion. In the center there is a lot of activity from what we call a black hole. So when a huge star reaches the end of its life, it collapses under its own weight and gets more and more dense, and the gravitational field is so strong that nothing can escape. That's why we call it a black hole. And there's one in the middle of most galaxies, like the Milky Way. There's one there as well. So you're seeing a lot of activity happening there. You're also seeing patches where new stars are forming. So this was a revolutionary picture, if you like. And people had said to the director of the observatory, when you launch the telescope, it'll be another 4 or 5 years before you get science. But our engineers were so good, we launched the telescope with a scientifically very exciting picture, which will come out in the publications quite soon. There's another very nice telescope being built, which we're doing with the Americans and the British and various others, called the Hera telescope. So you can see it's made out of chicken wire and wooden posts, and it watches the sky going overhead. And this telescope, which is being built with local South African material, local people, is looking for the signs of the very first stars that formed in the universe 14,000 million years ago.
I need to wrap my head around that number.
Okay.
14,000
So
million.
the universe started about 14,000 million years ago and exploded and gradually expanded. And as it expanded, it got cold and was full of hydrogen gas. And then there were little lumps in it which collapsed and formed stars. And those stars were very big and heavy. So they were very bright. And then they ended their lives and exploded. And then new stars formed. So you want to know, how did the first stars form? And how did they light up the universe? And how long did they last? That telescope, we hope, will tell us that.
Sure. So you spoke about a range of really exciting projects in the pipeline. I mean, this seems like already a big part of really some exciting developments. But maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about what is the expected scientific contribution the SKA is expected to deliver, not only for the continent, not only for Australia, but definitely for the world. Have we been able to pin that down?
So if you're talking about the scientific benefits, what we've done in a sense is reverse the brain drain. So young researchers now and more senior researchers see Africa now as a very important place to do astronomy. So instead of our young people going to America or Europe or somewhere else to do science, their people are coming here and our people are staying here. So what we expect the Square Kilometre Array to do is to tell us really how the universe developed. Believe it or not, the structure of the universe is like a honeycomb. So there are empty spaces, and then there are, if you like, walls where there are a lot of galaxies and clouds of gas and so on. We want to understand that, how the universe developed over the 14,000 billion years. How did galaxies form? How do they change from being a blob into a nice spiral like the Milky Way? Lots of things. We want to test Einstein's theory of relativity. We want to understand about gravitational waves. lots of very exciting science will come out of this.
I do want to bring us to the development agenda on the continent and the extent to which space forms a part of that equation. Why is it important for us at a time when we're really looking for strategies that are going to build economies, that are going to build talent pools, that are going to make markets and the continent increasingly competitive, that we focus our attention and investment towards space and projects of this nature?
So when we started this project, many people said to us, why are you investing in radio astronomy? It's a very esoteric subject. Why don't you invest in food security or water or things that you need in Africa? And the Department of Science and Technology wrote a white paper in 1996, which was, of course, approved by the cabinet at that time, which said, we don't accept that here in the South we can only do practical stuff, and the really clever stuff we'll leave to people in the north. Because what we're doing is we're digging stuff out of the ground, sending it to them, they make it into advanced technology, and we buy the smartphones here. So we said we've got to be part of that digital economy. And you can't do that unless you're building up large numbers of young people who've got world-class skills and know-how, because coming out of university with a degree doesn't give you the know-how, it gives you the basic skills. So you've got to give young people exciting projects where they can learn the know-how as well as the skills. And that's what this is about. And over the years since 2003, I think everybody's accepted the idea that science and technology is a key part of the development agenda. It's not just growing better maize or or better water sources. We have to be part of a global economy. We don't live in a bubble. And we're impacted by the fourth industrial revolution, as the WEF has been saying, and we can't ignore it. So it's better that we have the skills and the expertise, that we can play a role in it rather than just let it impact us.
So again, sounds like a very deliberate stance to make sure that we're not onlookers and bystanders of the fourth industrial revolution, but instead active participants as Africans. I want to follow the money for a little bit and maybe just talk a little bit about the investment journey thus far. Can you share some of those numbers for us? How much has it taken to make these early projects and the big SKA a reality? And who has really put their money behind investing in science and technology on the continent?
So the South African government has funded the Meerkat telescope. A lot of the developments in Africa have been funded either by South Africa or jointly with, in this case, the Newton Fund. But the Square Kilometre Array itself is being built by a consortium. An international treaty has been signed. There are 10 countries, probably another 3 or 4 will be joining quite soon. So they'll fund jointly the telescope. And of course, the payback for us will be largely in the operating costs because they'll come into South Africa. So over the 50 or 60 years of the telescope, there'll be an inflow of funds. I would argue, though, that besides the construction contracts and the technology contracts and all the other things that will go into building and operating the telescope, the most important benefits are the intangible ones. That is, I don't believe there's any country in the world that has enough engineers and scientists. If you Google, you find the most important and attractive jobs now are data analytics, data scientists. Every country in the world wants more data scientists. As it happens, a good training in astronomy sets you up very well to be a very good data scientist. So even if you don't stay in astronomy, you can go into this huge new demand for data scientists. So the intangible benefits are that we're producing young people who are really very good with world-class skills and expertise in these issues, in these subjects which are so important in the future.
I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and try and see if I can prod you a little bit. I want to talk about the higher education institutions and the extent to which they're actually producing the type of young people with the type of skills that you're looking for. So if you were to have an opportunity to speak directly to the designers of curricula in higher education institutions, what would you say to them? And do you think what they're producing is sufficient for what you need?
I think people have been a bit slow to react. The universities are now doing quite a lot. So we worked, for instance, with the Solplaika University in Kimberley, and they started a data science course several years ago because of our close proximity. But the other universities are doing that. They're master's degrees now in data science, and they're moving on beyond that. There's a lot of work being done on artificial intelligence, for instance, University of Joburg, Wits University, Pretoria, and so on, Cape Town. So there is a response.
Yeah.
Is it fast enough? I'm not sure. What is happening now, of course, is that Amazon and others are building in South Africa.
Yeah.
And what I hear is that they're sucking people out of the university. So as soon as young people have done their honours degrees, instead of carrying on, they get sucked into these well-paid jobs in Amazon and Google and so on. The problem with that is that there's going to be nobody to teach the next generation.
Right.
So that's going to be an ongoing problem. So I think people are reacting. Certainly government is aware of it. Our president has, as you know, established the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Department of Higher Education, Blade and Zimandi, has established a commission to work on the educational aspects of that. Hopefully we'll get something very practical. My concern is that we can try to be all things to all people and try to do too much. Our history in South Africa is we take on too much, and our execution is not always very good.
And if we were to strip out the noise from the clutter, because essentially if we were to commit to not being all things to all people, we almost have to be deliberate about what we prioritize and then build an action plan about what will cascade and follow next. And if you were to be able to whisper in the ear of Blade Nzimande and maybe even President Ramaphosa himself, where do we start? What would be the most tangible, practical step that if we took this step, we would see more quality skills rising to the surface, we would see talent staying in the country, and we would see the real momentum that we need to make sure that we not only meet the targets of what we're building, but we outperform on every metric?
Well, I think the first thing is infrastructure. So we need to have very fast broadband available much more widely and much more cheaply than it is.
Yeah.
I think the private sector has to do most of that, so we need to ask what legislation or regulations stand in the way of extending that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the state will have to subsidize extension into rural areas and small towns. The second thing is our universities. There's a lot of pressure for us to bring young people into first degrees at the universities.
Yeah.
We have to be very careful that we don't sacrifice the research capacity. And of course, there's tremendous pressure on the universities because their funds are being moved into undergraduate education. We have to make sure we don't lose the ability to do graduate education and research. The third area is to say, where are our strengths already?
Right.
And what are the kind of things that we can get into? So we've got very good strengths in things like machine learning. We need to build on those and really make it easier for entrepreneurs and bigger corporations to develop in those areas that we're already strong. And I think one of the areas that we're missing out on is we're not making partnerships with people like the motor industry,
Right.
the financial services industry, both of which have extensive technology development.
So industry partnerships in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the motor industry, the German companies, the American companies are in South Africa. They've done tremendous work in their home countries.
Yeah.
We should be sharing it here.
So clear four priorities: infrastructure, broadband in particular, and getting the private sector to participate, universities and a focus on research, thinking about our strengths and mapping those out as a country as a starting point, but also going into those industrial partnerships. Now, what I would like to ask you now, Prof, is maybe to just shift our focus for a moment away from South Africa, because I think there's always a tendency when we speak about the SKA to talk about South Africa +8. And I know that you'd already touched on some of the wins in the Ghanaian market, But can we just talk a little bit about the highlights in some of the other partner countries? What's happened there so far? Where are you seeing the most exciting developments? And if there are any concerns in some of those markets, what could those be?
So I think the countries that are perhaps developing these areas in the most sustainable way are Namibia and Botswana. They've invested in their universities, they've invested in capacity, and I think what they're building is quite sustainable. In Ghana, they've trained a lot of young people, and I think they're doing well. Their problem has just been a budgetary problem.
Yeah.
So it's never quite clear that they are putting their money where their mouths are. They're very enthusiastic, but you need to actually invest as well.
Got to put your money where your mouth is, right?
You've got to put your money where your mouth is. Madagascar is an interesting country because for all its problems and the shortage of money, we found people there to be immensely enthusiastic. They come to all the courses. They've trained a lot of people. They've got a really dynamic group of young scientists and engineers there. I don't know enough about that country to know how you take it forward, but at least you've got the basis. Mauritius is the same. So I think that there are... Kenya, of course, is a country which has got quite an advanced IT system, so it's feeding into that. But again, what our government has done is to say we've got to invest. If we don't invest, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think those other countries, Namibia and Botswana, have perhaps taken that step. I think the others have to take that step as well and say, if this is an important part of our development agenda, then we have to invest in it.
And as a final question, Dr. Fanaroff, maybe just take us a little bit into the future. I know that we've been looking into the past and seeing how the world developed and how the first stars came. Let's look to the future and look into the stars in that context now. What to expect over the next couple of years? What kind of developments can we expect from the SKA as Africans?
It's very difficult to do that. So we can certainly say that we'll be able to do some of the things that we've already proposed. We're going to make surveys of the sky, understand the structure of the universe better, test Einstein's theory of relativity better, find out why there's magnetism, all these esoteric subjects. But all of these big telescopes become famous because they discover things that nobody expected. So it's the unknown unknowns. And I'm waiting to see what comes out of the unknown unknowns. But one of the very exciting things for me is that because you have such huge quantities of information coming out of the telescopes, you can't analyze those manually. You have to use machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think that's going to be a very exciting area of growth.
Well, there you have it, the unknown unknown. And if you're on for the journey to explore and uncover that, you can certainly do that by keeping your eyes and your ears closely to the story of the development of the SKA and how it continues to deliver socio-economic benefits, not only in South Africa, but also in Australia and the 8 partner African countries as well. A very big thank you to Dr. Bernie Fanaroff. He is the special advisor to the director at the SKA for sitting with us in conversation. Remember that you can tweet us at CNBC Africa, also using the hashtag CNBC Africa Exchange and WEFA for WEF Africa 19. Do stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us.